we were massively affected, and we're really affected because Twizel every 2 years hosts the Mardi Cup. So, that was obviously devastating for Twizel and obviously a lot of local businesses. We have reduced our prices, and we're doing, more marketing and advertising. So, thankfully we are having a lot of support from Kiwis, which is incredible. So, the Kiwis who can't get overseas, they're coming down and exploring what's in their own back garden.
Yeah, so what can you do? Give us, in a nutshell, a couple of things you can do on the farm stay.
Oh, so probably the big attraction is we've got an awful lot of friendly animals. So we provide complimentary animal feed. So we really encourage the guests to, go and interact with the animals. All of them are ridiculously friendly. They've got a lot of big personalities. So a lot of guests just get so much, enjoyment from wandering through. We've got little walkways, which it's pretty obvious where they can go to. And then the other big thing that we have got is the outdoor bath. So obviously we're the Mackenzie Night Sky.
I'm sold.
The night sky.
But then at the end of the day, you can just lie in your outdoor
look
bath.
at the stars.
Look at the stars, Milky Way.
You have the best stars.
Special.
Yeah.
I actually, Lila's right. Have you? I'm lucky enough to have experienced the night sky in the Mackenzie country, and
me too.
When I actually could not believe it because I hadn't seen a night sky like that.
It is out of this world, and I have an uncle who's been involved in the whole development of the large telescopes.
Oh, really?
Near Tekapo, and just the beauty of that place. And do you get traffic from the Alps to Ocean bike ride? I think we stayed in Twizel when we did that.
Yeah, when we first opened, we were imagining that we would be, because it does pretty much just go through us. We do get the odd few people from Alps to Ocean, but not a huge amount at the moment. It's kind of dependent as to what the accommodation option is. Probably what we find is the shepherd's hut, the tiny homestay experience. A lot of 20, 30-year-olds really enjoy that. The Merino cottage is more for families, and then the executive barn is a little bit more, indulgent and a little bit more pampering.
And people are probably coming for a few days rather than just overnight, right? And that's better for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's great if, people spend a little bit longer. And also, then people get a chance to explore the Mackenzie area. We do find a lot of people use it as a base, and then they'll go exploring up to Mount Cook, Tekapo. So, it's great if people can spend, a few days here.
All the best to you, Angela, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And that is Highland Farm Stay.
Yep, Highland Farm Stay.
Yeah. .co.nz, and this series of small business pieces from the panel is online as well. But it's interesting, Andrew, something that you might be so familiar with, those friendly animals that you'll see. To someone like my 3-year-old, it's just a whole new world. Absolutely loves the patting a lamb, that type of thing. It's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, I've got a couple of 100-kilo Speckle Park bulls. They're probably not that patting type. We did have one called Mr. Cuddles. He was very cuddly when he was a little calf, but it is when we sent him off, not so cuddly anymore.
No, okay, all right. Andrew Hoggard, Lila Hari, thank you very much for being with me today.
Thank you.
I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow 3:45. Checkpoint next. Bye.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, the government announces border exemptions for 250 international postgrad students. So who's in and who's out? Early voters crack the 1 million mark in a record rush to the polls. Is it RIP for Auckland's CBD post-COVID? The advertising watchdog knocks back Nige the eco-warrior. Meridian Energy's told to pull misleading environmental ads immediately. Job losses continue to mount in heavy industry. Who's next? And investigations found the dating app Tinder is failing to act when women report sexual assaults. Auckland's water restrictions are being eased. And put down the penguin. It's a selfie that could cost you $100K.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. A limited number of foreign students could return to New Zealand as early as next month. The government is making an exemption to its border rules for 250 PhD and postgraduate students. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The government says the students must already have been enrolled for study in 2020 and it will prioritise those who need to do hands-on research in this country. It says the first of the students could arrive next month, though it's expecting most to come next year. More than half of New Zealand's nearly 8,000 PhD students are foreigners, and some have been stuck overseas because of the pandemic. Universities and other education organisations have been lobbying the government to reopen the border to students. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
The verdict from the Electoral Commission is in. The latest tally of advance votes is record-breaking. More than 1.15 million votes have been cast early, with over 450,000 people voting at the weekend. Graham Astle from the Electoral Commission says it's an unprecedented figure.
It's record-breaking. So in 2017, for the advance voting period, we took 1.24 million votes. We are very close to exceeding that now, so I would suggest that very early this week we'll pass that.
The National Manager of Voting Services, Graham Astle. The National Party leaders ruled out key elements of potential Partner Act's economic plan, including a flat tax and cuts to benefits. Judith Collins has been campaigning in Christchurch today after launching an attack over a Labour Greens government and a wealth tax at the weekend. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Labour leader Jacinda Ardern has repeatedly ruled out the Greens policy, a tax on individuals' assets over $1 million. Ms Collins says, though, Labour wants a capital gains tax and would cave on its promise of no new taxes if it needs the Greens to govern, and she denies spreading misinformation. She herself ruled out key parts of the ACT plan, including a flat tax, cuts to benefits or cuts to spending on health and education. Ms Collins says voters can trust her to stick to her word on that, but not the Labour leadership on tax. In Christchurch, Jane Patterson.
Regions are grappling with a dry spring and fear a lack of rain will lead to another serious drought. However, weather experts are predicting a brighter outlook for some hard-hit North Island regions. NIWA says although it's been a dry spring in Northland and Hawke's Bay, this may change with a La Niña pattern expected to bring more rain. Although the South Island's wet now, NIWA says it could be in for a spell of dry weather as summer approaches. Waitaki's mayor says recovery has started for homeowners at Lake Oho Alpine Village. The fire that started 8 days ago destroyed 48 buildings and almost burnt through 5,000 hectares of the Mackenzie Basin. Gary Kircher says the village now holds an unfortunate national record.
That's the record, the unfortunate record this one holds, is that it has been the most houses lost in a single fire. Our team's working really well and coordinating with insurance companies. Things will, I think, go reasonably smoothly. For the residents, we need to make it as easy as possible for them to get back on with their lives.
Access to the village remains restricted to property owners and contractors. A whale has died after getting stuck underneath a wharf in Auckland. The 4-metre-long juvenile minke whale got stuck near the Hobsonville ferry terminal. Local iwi have blessed the whale and arrangements are being made for its removal. Conservationist Darren Grover says the whale was likely disoriented.
As the tide has been incoming, it's quite a shallow area here. Antarctic minke whales aren't a coastal species. They're used to much deeper water. So coming in, it was probably quite confused by how shallow the water is here.
Darren Grover of Project Jonah. It's 4 minutes past 5. Wallabies player Reece Hodge had a sleepless night pondering what might have been after Australia went agonisingly close to ending their 20-year winless streak against the All Blacks in Wellington yesterday. Hodge had the chance to end the 16-all deadlock with a 60-metre penalty kick on the stroke of full time, but his booming long-range effort hit the upright, denying the Wallabies victory.
Bit of a broken sleep last night. I've probably replayed it hundreds of times by now, but obviously pretty swelly wind in Wellington. Throughout the warm-up, they were kind of going everywhere, left, right, and you always get told to just aim straight down the middle, kind of aimed it just inside the left post, and turns out just outside the left post would have been a bit better. I struck it as well as I could have and was kind of just praying when it was in the air.
The second test in the 4-game Bledisloe Cup series is in Auckland on Sunday. Meanwhile, speculation continues to swirl that world champion South Africa may pull out of the Rugby Championship. There's a suggestion that Rassie Erasmus, who coached the Springboks to their World Cup win last year and is now Director of Rugby, will cite player welfare as the reason for their late withdrawal. The Los Angeles Lakers have won a record-equalling 17th NBA basketball championship with a 106-93 victory over the Miami Heat in Game 6 of the best-of-7 series to seal the title 4-2. The Lakers' victory ties them with the Boston Celtics for most championships in NBA history. That's the news.
The final week of election campaigning.
We're probably going to be subject to a wealth tax if James Shaw gets his way.
No, it's total bollocks.
Mischievous and wrong. The Test rugby drought is broken.
There is nothing so dull as a dull rugby game, but by God, there's nothing so fantastic as a fantastic rugby game.
And a Fairley man wins his 100th competitive sheep shearing title.
It's a big monkey to have on your head. I know it's only a number, but it's a nice number to have put behind you.
A Competitive Edge morning report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Periods of rain clearing from the west tomorrow afternoon and evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mostly fine. Scattered rain in Hawke's Bay spreading to Gisborne tomorrow. Taranaki to Wellington, including Wairarapa. Rain heavy about the high ground, easing tonight. Isolated showers tomorrow gradually clearing. For Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago except Clutha. Scattered showers, some possibly heavy and thundery with hail today, especially for inland Canterbury. Showers becoming isolated tomorrow morning and areas of low cloud clearing. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, scattered showers turning to rain in Fiordland tomorrow night. Southland and Clutha becoming fine today apart from isolated showers inland. Fine tomorrow apart from areas of morning fog and rain at night. Chatham Islands, a few showers turning to rain tomorrow. RNZ National at 5:07.
Thanks, Susanna, and welcome to Checkpoint. Tonight has COVID killed the CBD and Eco Hero to zero. The company slammed for greenwashing. But first, the government's agreed to let 250 international postgraduate students back into New Zealand under a special exemption scheme. The students will have to complete the mandatory 2 weeks isolation in a government-managed facility and could start arriving as soon as next month. Universities New Zealand has welcomed the move but says it's looking forward to extending the scheme to more students who are stuck offshore due to the pandemic. Education New Zealand is the government agency tasked with promoting this country as an international study destination. Steve Mahari is the chair and joins me now. Good evening. How is this quota going to work? Which students?
Well, they can come from any country as long as they are involved in a PhD study or they are a master's student. So they're basically research students who are at the moment holding a 2020 visa and they are involved in their studies and cannot study online, so it's best for them to come back to the country to be able to complete their course of study.
So ultimately, who chooses them, and will they be spread around different universities, or how does it work?
It'll depend really on who applies. So at the moment, the Ministry of Education will approach tertiary providers, universities, and Polytechs, of course, could also receive students like this to discuss with them who has students at the moment who fit that kind of criteria, got a visa in the midst of their study, valuable students that need to come back in to finish that course of study. When that is worked out, if it's all 250 PhD students, then they'll start to come into the country. If the 250 can't be filled by PhD students, the move will go into research-based master's students.
Define valuable for us. You said they need to be valuable students. In what way?
Well, they're valuable in a variety of ways. They're valuable to the student, of course, because they are in the midst of their study and need to be able to complete it. But these kinds of students, of course, also are involved in research which is useful to New Zealand. So having them back into the country completing their course of study will be useful to us. So, for example, if they're involved in agricultural studies, of course, that's very useful to New Zealand, particularly at this time. So having them value in that broader sense, both to them and to the country, fits that criteria of a PhD student or a master's student involved in a research program.
So you've got 250 spaces. How many people do you think fit the criteria who have a current visa for 2020 and who are either postgraduate or PhD students versus the number of spots you've got?
I think that's an unknown number because, of course, it will depend on the students saying, yes, I do want to come back. I have settled into being here, but now I know I can get back into the country. I'll apply. It will depend, of course, on the status of their research program. And
but
so
it would be
so
thousands, wouldn't it? It would be thousands, wouldn't it?
Potentially, yes. There are a considerable number of people who were studying. If we go to the overall figures, there are usually about 70,000 students in the country studying at all levels. And of those, yes, we're talking about PhD students being in the thousands, not huge thousands, but a good cohort of them, yes.
So who pays? They go into managed isolation. Who pays for that? Is the student directly billed?
Yeah. The student will pay for their own quarantine, yes.
And at what level? Full price or...
Once again, that'll depend, of course, where they go, but yes, they pay the full costs of their quarantine.
Okay, so this is sort of, well, when you put it in perspective, it is the fifth largest export, education, $5 billion industry. This is a pretty trifling exemption, isn't it?
It is small, but I think the sector have been universally welcoming of this because they've been looking for it for some time. Education New Zealand spends a lot of time working with the sector and has been in contact, of course, right through this pandemic. So today we've been back in contact with them again. They are very happy with us, but as you've heard from the universities, they see this as a sign that things are going to get better, and they want us to get better as fast as they possibly can, because, as you probably know, I was Vice Chancellor of Massey University for some time. This is a large amount of revenue. It's a significant number of students. It impacts not just on the university that takes in these students. Of course, they go to homestays, they stay in the city, they have the life of the city in many ways as well. But all sorts of things come from this. So there's a real interest now that the door seems to be opening a bit to be able to move as fast as possible, yes.
Could you say more specifically where they may come from?
No, they can't. I can't say that because they could come from anywhere. They could come from Brazil. There's a large number of students who come in from there who typically do agricultural science-based studies. They could come from India. They could come from China. They could come from Europe. At my university, for example, in the old days, we had 60 nationalities represented in our student body, international student body. So it's a very large spread, and they could come from anywhere, depending on them saying they want to come back, but their course of study is ready for them to come back. All of those criteria have to be worked through first.
So the government's green-lighting 250 spots, but how many did the university ask for?
The universities haven't asked for anything. This has been something which has been done by the government trying to think through what it can do to get.
Well, the universities have been asking for all the international students to come back. So were they involved in discussions with a specific number around this exemption? Were they asked for their opinion? Did they give any numbers, as far as you know?
Not with Education New Zealand, they haven't been, no. The contact we've had with them has always been, as you've described, that the universities are very keen to be part of an reopening as quickly as they possibly can, and would like to see, of course, all of their students back across the border. So no number that I've heard of, and no number that's been mentioned to the government specifically. I think the universities really just want to get started on returning to normal as fast as they can.
So Education New Zealand, right? You're supposed to promote us overseas as an international study destination. I mean, with the greatest of respect, what are you doing now?
One of the things we've had to continue to do is, like other countries, like our major competitors, Canada, the UK, Australia, the US to an extent, all of those countries have been trying to maintain contact with their international markets so that they know that those students know that they can come back at some time. The UK has actually allowed some students back in. The Canadians and the Australians haven't done so yet, although they have mentioned at times that they would. So part of our job has been to stay in touch overseas. We have agents, obviously, overseas. We have staff overseas. But on top of that, working with the sector, working with the government, for example, just repatriating students has been part of what ENZ has been assisting with as well. So,
but as other countries, which you'll be acutely aware, as other countries let students back in, like in Europe and the UK, if we're the last cab up off the rank, we're going to miss out, aren't we? Our students, or students that would potentially come to us, are going to make decisions to go elsewhere because we're not accepting them. Only 250.
Yeah, that's one of the moot points, I think. One of the things about New Zealand at the moment is it's very well regarded, obviously, internationally, because it's one of the countries that seem to have handled COVID-19 as well as can be handled. So that's given us an enormous reputational advantage. I don't think we want to blow that by letting people back across the border and then finding that the country isn't a safe venue for them anymore. So that's something we must protect. But you're right, we have to try and move at a pace that doesn't leave us behind our main competitors. Otherwise, yes, of course, agents in places around the world will say, well, you can't go to New Zealand, so we'll send you off to Canada or somewhere else. So we have to keep an eye on that, keep pace with them. So far we are, and we're trying to make sure by doing this, I imagine this is one of the motivations for the government, and certainly from what we've heard, it's going to be well received, that people are saying, yes, it's very small, but it is a sign that the government is now putting its toe back in the water, making it clear to people that international education, that $5 billion that's been out there as revenue, but also all the other gains we get, the government wants that, and this is a signal to both domestic audiences and overseas that the government's serious about going back down that line again.
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That is Steve Mahari, who is the chair of Education New Zealand, and apologies for that slightly dodgy line there. It is 16 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Interested in your thoughts on that? So 250 postgrad students, PhD students, as Steve Mahari said there, PhD students will be given preference. Does that go far enough? Is it too many? Would you rather we weren't letting any in? Text us your thoughts on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And remember, they will have to do mandatory isolation for 2 weeks at their own expense. As political parties hit the final week of the campaign, National leader Judith Collins isn't backing down on her wealth tax attack on Labor. Ms Collins says a Labor Green government would introduce a wealth tax that's despite Labor categorically ruling that out. She says Labor can't be taken at their word, but she's asking voters to trust her on what ACT policies she's ruling out adopting. Here's political reporter Yvette McCullough.
Yes. Oh, hi, it's Judith Collins.
I'm just calling around,
Judith Collins working the phones with local candidates in Christchurch.
We're suggesting that everyone gets out to vote as soon as possible, particularly if you already know where you want to vote. Have you decided on that?
And we're encouraging people.
Thank you very much.
She was sticking to her attack line today that Labor can't be trusted when it says a wealth tax is categorically off the cards.
I don't believe for a moment that these guys aren't going to come after everyone's money, come after New Zealanders' money that's been hard worked for, and they want to take it off them.
Ms Collins told reporters that if she's at the negotiating table with ACT, things like a flat tax and cuts to benefits won't be on National's cards.
You have your tax policy, ACT's tax policy is off the table. That's basically what Jacinda Ardern is saying with regards to the Greens.
But you can believe me.
So it's a trust game then, is it?
No, it's like this. I'm not someone who takes the chocolate biscuits to the bargaining table to show subservience.
Labor leader Jacinda Ardern says it's frustrating National is continuing to campaign on misinformation.
My view is that they should be courageous enough to debate real issues and fact, not fiction.
Jacinda Ardern was campaigning in Hamilton today, meeting supporters at the Hamilton Gardens.
Today, can we just make sure that the Prime Minister heard a warm Waikato welcome located here in Hamilton?
She laid out her party's 5-point plan and long-term vision.
If you want to make change, real change, you need to bring people with you.
Following her speech, Ms Ardern was mobbed by well-wishers and selfie requests.
Good luck for this. Can I have a selfie?
But it wasn't just a love fest, with Federated Farmers representatives taking the chance to let the Labor leader know their concerns about fresh water.
Disillusionment and worry out there amongst farmers about these freshwater changes and everything else that's been heaped upon them. It's not so much what's in it; it's the time frames for it, and we're sort of.
Some of them are quite long.
Some of them are quite short too.
Yeah.
One of those farmers, Ben Moore, told me afterwards. Ms Ardern gave a typical politician's response.
I mean, yeah, she's very empathetic, shows a degree of understanding, but I think actually you've got to get out there on the ground without some camera crews behind you and go and sit around the table with some farmers and go and actually talk to them what they're going through at the moment.
Mr Moore isn't feeling very optimistic there'll be movement on the timeframes on freshwater reform.
So we've set those standards. We now have a group, including representatives from the farming community, supporting us with implementation, making sure that we get it right in the rollout.
Later in the afternoon, Ms Ardern pulled a big crowd with an absolute crush of people wanting selfies with her at the base mall.
We're not going to get you trodden on. It's okay. I'll try and move over here so there's a bit of space.
Hi.
Hi.
She's my mum. She likes it.
Sure. Do you want to get a photo? And no trouble.
Judith Collins continued to be asked about caucus unity today, but told reporters she's not interested in finding out who leaked a damaging email last week, as she has her campaign to focus on. In Hamilton for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
And while the parties are still traipsing up and down the country trying to squeeze out every last vote they can, more than 1 million people have already made up their mind and had their say. It's a record-breaking rush on the polls and is just shy of the total number of early votes cast in 2017. So what's the implication for the parties and election night itself? Katie Doyle went to find out.
Advance voters are out in force. A record-breaking 1.15 million people have cast their votes since booths opened on October 3rd. Graham Astle from the Electoral Commission says there's been huge demand to get to the polls early.
It's record-breaking. So in 2017, for the advance voting period, we took 1.24 million votes. We are very close to exceeding that now. So I would suggest that very early this week we'll pass that.
Otago University law professor Andrew Geddes agrees and says there could be a few reasons for the rush on the voting booths.
That probably reflects New Zealanders getting more used to the idea of it being available, as well as just the uncertainty of the COVID environment. People, I think, are just wanting to make sure they get their vote in because who knows what things are going to be like come the weekend.
Advance votes will start being counted at 9 a.m. on election day. The first results should start coming through shortly after 7 p.m, and Mr Geddes says that could give a pretty good indication of the final result.
Because those early votes pretty much track the votes cast on election day itself, we'll be able to extrapolate out from them to pretty much see what the election result's going to be. So quite soon after 7 o'clock on polling day, we will pretty much know who's won the election. So some of the drama of the evening is going to be taken away by the fact so many of these advance votes are cast.
There will still be some drama, with electorates like Auckland Central and Wairiki shaping up to be interesting races. But Mr Geddes says the referendum results won't come until later on.
The referendum votes aren't going to be counted until all the parliamentary votes have been counted. And so the Electoral Commission's made it clear we won't find out the referendum vote until early November.
On the campaign trail, Labour leader Jacinda Ardern says high advance voting figures are good to see.
It means they're leaving nothing to chance for election day. I think it also does demonstrate that people are locking in their choices early this time. And of course our hope is that they're locking it in with a plan around the future of New Zealand's recovery.
National leader Judith Collins has spent the day in Christchurch visiting the National Party phone bank, calling people to talk about advance voting. She says lots of people have been telling her it was 2 ticks blue at the booth.
Some people have told me today when I've been phoning around that they're still going to vote on Saturday. There's still a lot of people who feel that Saturday is being the election day is the day that they want to go there. But personally, I know exactly how I'm voting, so I knew I didn't need to think about it too long. And I think there's quite a few people saying the same.
The polls close at 7 p.m. on election day, October the 17th. For Checkpoint, Katie Doyle.
A Meridian Energy TV ad featuring the trials of a Kiwi eco-hero has been ordered off-air after it was found to make misleading environmental claims. Rival power company Electric Kiwi complained to the Advertising Standards Authority about the ad, titled "For Power That Doesn't Cost the Earth," saying its claims were unsubstantiated and the power Meridian sells is no greener than anyone else's. The ASA has ruled in its favour, ordering the ads to be pulled immediately. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Nigel's always doing his bit for the planet. Going plastic free? Legend.
Nigel is a good Kiwi bloke helping to save the planet in Meridian's latest campaign. He refuses to use plastic bags for his fruit and veggies, turns down straws for his smoothie.
Nice one, Nige.
And goes as far as using his beanie to scoop his dog's poop.
Ooh.
But it's the ad's final plug which sparked outrage in the power sector.
Doing your bit for the environment just got easier. Switch to Meridian for power that doesn't cost the earth.
Rival power company Electric Kiwi cried foul over Meridian's ad and an implication that customers would receive renewable power by switching to Meridian.
It conflates their generation of renewable energy with what retail customers might receive through their lines, and there's just no way that a retailer can make any claim about the source of the energy that's delivered. So we felt that's both misleading in terms of, what it can deliver, but also greenwashing to suggest that one retailer's energy might be greener than another's.
Electric Kiwi CEO Luke Blinko went to the Advertising Standards Authority to argue that while all of Meridian's energy is generated from renewable sources, that's not true of the power it sells. That's mixed in with power from coal and non-renewable sources.
I think they were looking to appeal to Kiwis with a strong sense of environmental responsibility, and we think it's really unhelpful to create those sort of perceptions when in actual fact switching retailers won't change your carbon footprint. How you use energy is really the only way to change that.
Meridian defended the claims. It said consumers would understand the ad's claims as a reference to Meridian's well-documented renewable energy generation capabilities, and they would not assume that Meridian adhered to an environmentally sustainable model in every aspect of its business. But the Advertising Standards Authority rejected that.
The electricity customers buy from Meridian or any other retailer is all sourced from a pool generated by both renewable and non-renewable methods. Therefore, Meridian cannot make an environmental claim about its retail electricity product.
Kath Dewar, Managing Director at Good Sense, an ethical marketing company, says it's a case of Meridian wanting to have its cake and eat it too.
Rather than telling a full picture, what advertising tends to do is tell a part picture. And so what has happened in this instance is that Meridian have told the glass half full story, but they haven't told the half empty story, if you like.
She says people need to be wary of greenwashing in their advertising campaigns.
New Zealanders are being more demanding than ever that the companies they buy from do right by nature and people, and companies know that they can make money out of that. But what we have is a tradition of advertising, which is to always emphasise the positive and not be candid about the negative.
As for Meridian's Nigel, his eco-warrior ways are on hold, with the Advertising Standards Authority ordering the ad to be pulled immediately. For Checkpoint, Corneta Blakeperson, Aho.
Now, Checkpoint did invite Meridian on the program this evening. It declined to be interviewed but provided a statement. It says Meridian's Chief Marketing Officer, Michael Healy, says while we disagree with the ASA's decision, we have changed our advertising to abide by it. Our ad was intended to demonstrate the little ways that Kiwis are trying to do right by the planet and promote the fact that we're competitively priced. It was certainly not our intent to suggest that customers only receive electrons directly from Meridian's wind farms or hydro stations, as the complaint suggested. As New Zealand's largest generator of and advocate for renewable energy, we will continue to encourage Kiwis to support renewable generation. Let us know what you think about that. You might have seen the ad yourself. Do you think they're misleading? Is it greenwashing? They've been told to pull them. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Auckland is nearly 1 week into its shift down to level 1, but central city businesses say they are still hurting. Checkpoint has spoken to a number of businesses calling for their fellow CBD workers to return to the office to help central Auckland's economy. Those calls have been repeated by Heart of the City, which says spending in the central city is down $100 million on this time last year. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and camera operator Simon Rogers filed this report.
It's just before 1 p.m. on Lawn Street, but you'd be forgiven for thinking otherwise. That's because there's no sign of any lunchtime rush. The central Auckland street is noticeably quiet, and you could count on two hands the number of people in most cafes. We're approaching a week since the City of Sales shifted to level 1, but central Auckland businesses say not much has changed, with the loss of tourists and international students compounded by Aucklanders choosing their home offices over the central city. Ethan Jull manages clothing store Mr. Simple on Lawn Street. The shop was empty when Checkpoint dropped in.
Definitely missing the tourists. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing, but there's also less people in offices, less people in town just in general, man. It's like cut town in half in terms of people walking around.
Next we visited Chuffed, a central Auckland cafe tucked down a walkway off Auckland's High Street. Duty manager Jared Swart is tied up taking coffee orders but takes time out for a brief chat. Chuffed is relatively busy on Monday afternoon, but looks can be deceiving.
We are still not at the same standards, but we're seeing regular customers definitely coming back, and people are coming in a lot more. During the week, still really slow, but weekends are picking up a little bit more now, so that's good.
Swart has a plea for Aucklanders choosing to work from home 5 days a week.
I think before what was limiting it was the fact that we had reserved tables to try and keep social distancing and stuff. And now that we can use all the tables, that's definitely helping. But obviously we just don't have the same regular client base because people are working at home. So apart from that, I think everything should be back on.
What would you say to people who are working at home and thinking, maybe I should start going back into the office? I assume that would benefit you guys if they decided to do so.
Definitely, come back to the office and then we can make you coffee as well, so that'd be good, yeah.
Auckland City Centre Business Association, Heart of the City, has been tracking Central Auckland's sudden slowdown.
I can tell you that this latest period from the 12th of August, midday on the 12th of August when we went back into level 3, up until the end of, this latest level 2, it was $100 million down on spending.
That's Heart of the City Chief Executive Viv Beck. She says tourism, hospitality, retail and entertainment businesses are disproportionately affected. The message from Heart of the City is clear. If you're working from home, think about heading back into the CBD.
That's a massive impact on those businesses across that time. So it absolutely is affecting them. And for some businesses that can sort of pack up and work from home, others are not able to do that, and they're reliant on the foot traffic that the businesses provide. So we're certainly hoping people will be given consideration and thought to this, because it is having a big impact on those businesses.
Checkpoint spoke to a number of Central City workers on Queen Street today. Almost all of them said either they or people they worked with weren't working in the city full time.
I just work with 2 other people. Actually, those 2 people are both working at home still, so there is a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, it's just whatever needs. So if I have client meetings, I'll come into town. Otherwise, I'll just work from home, but I'm okay either way.
I have been mostly in the office just because it's easier to communicate and work with other people.
For my current job, right, I would say even without COVID, I'll probably prefer to work from home anyway, just because, no transport and,
Save costs.
Yeah, exactly.
Back on Lawn Street, Pavi Diol is waiting to serve customers at break time convenience store, but there aren't many coming through the door. He says the combination of loss of tourism, overseas students and full-time city centre workers has created a perfect storm that's destroyed nearly half of the store's business.
And the business is still 50-60% down, but it's first week now, we are looking towards students are back. So how it's going, we have a feeling that it will go up, but not up to that extent that we used to be before. So you know what I'm saying? Because no more tourists as well. And the number of students has gone down as well, no more international as well.
Viv Beck says Heart of the City remains optimistic the Central City will recover. She says Level 1 has brought a bump in the number of people flocking to the CBD, particularly with the return of nighttime events. For now, though, it remains a daily struggle for those relying on daytime trade. For Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, water restrictions are eased in Auckland, but the council warns they could make a return. Tinder is accused of failing to act when women report sexual assaults, and a selfie with a blue penguin that could carry a huge price tag. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know whether you're still working at home as a result of COVID. We're letting 250 international students back into the country. What do you make of that? And what about greenwashing in advertising? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's get to Susanna with the headlines now.
Foreign students will be allowed into the country from as early as next month. The government will make border exemptions for up to 250 PhD and postgraduate students who must have already been enrolled in study for 2020. Education New Zealand Chair Steve Mahari told Checkpoint the students will stay in managed isolation for 14 days at their own cost. The government has agreed to buy 1.5 million doses of coronavirus vaccine from one of the leading contenders to produce one. And And it says there could be vaccines ready to go in the early part of next year if its clinical trials are successful and it passes all regulations. Research, Science and Innovation Minister Megan Woods says the vaccine from Pfizer and BioNTech says is just one option the government is looking into. The Electoral Commission is describing the number of New Zealanders who have voted early as unprecedented. More than 1.5 million votes have been cast already after 450,000 people voted over the weekend. Graham Astor from the Electoral Commission says the figure is record-breaking. National's Judith Collins has ruled out key elements of potential Partner Act's economic plan. The National Party leader has been campaigning in Christchurch today after launching an attack over Labour Greens government and a possible wealth tax. Ms Collins herself ruled out key parts of the Act plan, including a flat tax, cuts to benefits or cuts to spending on health and education. Conservationists believe a whale that died under an Auckland wharf was likely disoriented by shallow waters. The 4-metre-long juvenile minke whale died after becoming stuck near the Hobsonville ferry terminal. Local iwi have blessed the whale and arrangements are being made for its removal. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And it's time now for the business news with Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas, you got some breaking news for us. We love breaking news. A takeover offer for Abano Healthcare. It's been increased. So what does all that mean?
Yeah, so look, this will be welcome news for shareholders of in this dental company. They own those popular brands such as Lumino and Maven. And if you remember early in the year, this is one of those companies that had a deal on the table, but it was scuttled by the pandemic when the buyers evoked the dreaded material adverse change clause that have affected a number of companies this year. They felt like the trading conditions for the company had really changed because of the pandemic, and so they pulled that deal off the table. They did get back to negotiating back in August. A new offer was made at $4.45 a share. How that was drastically lower than that initial offer of $5.75. Well, today we've heard maybe about less than half an hour ago that Abano has been offered now. That offer has been revised. It's been increased by about 30 cents to $4.75 per share, and that reflects some improved trading conditions for the company. It's seen its sales for the first 4 months of their financial year improved by 9%. So some good news there for some shareholders that were really affected by the pandemic earlier this year.
And what about this lobby group for big business that has basically laid out its wish list for the election?
Yeah, you can always expect to hear a lot of these as you run up to an election. Businesses, industry groups, law firms, they've been really pumping out these press releases calling on the government to make legislative changes here, increase spending there. But we did get this report today from Business New Zealand's Major Companies Group, and in it they made some recommendations for the next government, 4 key recommendations, and I must say that none of them are really that new, but they focus in around jobs, letting skilled migrants back into the country, improving the development of infrastructure and just overall things to do with the economy. And like I said, we've heard about sort of this stuff before, but what was interesting was when I asked Kirk Hope, he's the Chief Executive of Business New Zealand, what the top priority it was. If you could have one of these to come to fruition, what would that be? He says it would be infrastructure. He says that the government needs to continue to develop and expand its infrastructure projects, but it can't just focus on roads and buildings. He's talking about things like social infrastructure, and one of the examples he points to is the Labour Party's recent announcement about improving rural connectivity. He says this is one of those schemes that won't just save jobs by employing people to build a network like this, but actually maybe create jobs by expanding the internet's reach in parts of the country where it hasn't been in the past. So we'll have to wait until after the election to see if this group's dreams come true.
And what were the markets looking like today?
Yeah, a quick whip around the markets. The NZX top 50 continues to surge. It's up by 0.2% to 12,356. That follows Chinese stocks. They've been surging at the moment. Our dollar, it's been a strong day for it once again. It's at 66.6 US cents, 92.2 Australian, and finally, we're at 51.1 British pence.
Gold for us?
Oh, I
today?
thought, well, gold is up. It's down by about $2 to $1,927 an ounce. Hasn't been too interesting recently, so I thought I'd drop it, but I'll keep it there for you.
There you go. Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with Business News there. Between Tiwai Point, Marsden Point, Glenbrook and now Kawerau, the potential job losses for heavy industry are starting to stack up. But is industry on death's door in New Zealand, and what's to blame? Onerous regulation, as some suggest, or is it the reality of being a tiny island at the bottom of the world during a time of global upheaval? Timothy Brown has been looking into it and has this report.
News broke this morning that a review was underway into the operations at the Tasman newsprint mill in Kawerau.
Norske Skog says COVID-19 has had a rapid, negative and likely irreversible impact on the newsprint industry in the region.
But the employer of 160 people in the Bay of Plenty isn't the first industrial player to signal a potential downsizing or exit of its New Zealand operations. The disruption facing New Zealand and the world's economy has shades of previous eras. Economist Cameron Bagri says the country can learn from its past mistakes.
One of the things that I guess we did in the 1980s and the 1990s was that as we went through this big change in our economic model, we weren't too great on that assistance package or support in regard to getting people back within the workforce in pretty sharp order.
Cameron Bagri says many of the disruptions to the country's economy are out of the hands of the government, but they can ensure they are there to pick up the pieces.
Well, there is going to be a transition of pain, and of course the government's got a strong role here to play in regard to supporting people through those economic challenges, unlocking opportunities on the other side, making sure we've got training facilities that are top-notch as people get redeployed and don't become permanently unemployed.
On the campaign trail today, both major parties' leaders acknowledged a storm is brewing. Labour leader Jacinda Ardern pointed to Tiwai Point, where the government has mooted a just transition, similar to what was rolled out in Taranaki.
We're seeing vastly rapid change across some of these sectors at the moment. What we're working to do is support the transition so that those who might be working in those sectors don't have jarring job loss, but have a future.
National leader Judith Collins pointed to onerous legislation and red tape as the problem.
What we're often hearing from businesses is that they're finding all the extra costs being put on by government really debilitating for them. So it's very important that we find out what's going on. We just can't keep constantly losing industry in the regions.
ACT leader David Seymour agrees and says New Zealand needs to rethink its approach to emissions.
People will say, well, that's just the cost of environmental protection, but not if it forces those activities to competitors elsewhere in the world who have lighter environmental regulations. We have to be careful that we don't actually leak activity to places where actually more environmental harm may be done.
New Zealand First's Regional Economic Development spokesperson Shane Jones says his party is the only one offering a middle ground in any potential future government.
On one side, we've got the carnivores from the ACT Party who just want the free market to lay waste to those things that they don't believe should exist if they can't pay their way. On the other side, we've got the herbivores, the mad cow ideology of the Green Party. NZ First believes that we need a nuanced and sophisticated approach that ensures that we don't export jobs, just end up importing carbon.
ETU negotiation specialist Joe Gallagher says whoever forms the next government will need to prioritise retaining New Zealand's industrial jobs. But Kawerau District Mayor Malcolm Campbell says his council have long accepted the writing is on the wall.
This has always been a constant for the last decade. For anybody to think that we're still going to be making paper in the next 10 years, well, you've got to be dreaming. So I think it's just a timely thing that they need to be making a move now rather than later. And I think that's all they're doing.
Cameron Bagri says the major shifts in the economy have been sped up by the COVID-19 pandemic, but they were always on the horizon. He says those who accept that and adapt accordingly will reap the benefits. For Checkpoint, Ko Timothy Brown, TNA.
Parts of the country grappling with a dry spring fear a lack of rain will lead to another serious drought this year. A 1 in 100-year drought hit regions like Northland and Hawke's Bay dramatically last summer, and some are preparing for a second round. But weather experts are predicting there might be a reversal of fortunes. Tom Kitchen has the story.
The far north have had it tough. The district's Mayor John Carter says rain hasn't fallen significantly in a while.
We needed to have at least 900 mils of rain over the last 3 or 4 months. We've had about half of that, but last month we ended up with 32 mils of rain, which is really low. And this month so far we've had 7, I think.
But if the weather plays fair, NIWA meteorologist Ben Knoll predicts the top of the country might be in for a switch by the end of the year.
The northern and eastern parts of the North Island, Northland, and down to the Hawke's Bay and Gisborne will begin to be more exposed to wet weather conditions. So that's not something that's going to, be a part of the weather here in the short term. But as we go from November into December and then into the summer season, those areas that are quite dry right now will see their chances for beneficial rainfall increase.
That's due to La Niña, part of the climate cycle, cooling the average ocean temperatures in the tropical Pacific Ocean. Although that's some distance from New Zealand, the temperatures help forecasters predict what will happen here. Hawke's Bay might be in for the same. Today, Fire and Emergency New Zealand put the bay in a restricted fire season. That's a month earlier than last year, when the huge drought hit. Finn says this is because of an unusual windy, warm and dry spring, which has dried out most of Hawke's Bay. For Lockie McGilvray, who's helped support farmers during the drought, it's a waiting game to see if a drought will reappear.
It's quite possible that we could get some nice rains later in the month and through into November, in line with the La Niña event, which is what they're saying. However, those of us who have been around before know that we've had droughts in La Niña seemingly as often as we've had droughts in El Niño. So, we're a bit cautionary about that.
Gisborne farmer Peter Jex-Blake says conditions at the moment are on a knife's edge, and farmers will have to take action if the region doesn't get rain reasonably soon.
Farmers will wean earlier and get still a lot more lambs on the store market, which, obviously there'd be a bit of a suppression in the prices on the store market. There was a particularly large cattle fair last week. I guess some farmers may have just been taking a precautionary approach and selling some cattle earlier than they might otherwise sell them.
Farmers in the South Island have had some wet weather, but NIWA's Ben Knoll suggests their fortunes might change.
For the South Island, we might expect to see that dryness linger for longer. So in Canterbury and Otago and then even Southland as the rest of the year unfolds, these are the regions that we are going to have our eyes on for persistent patterns of dryness.
Minister of Agriculture Damien O'Connor warns with climate change, these events could become more acute.
It's a bit of an unknown one. What we have seen is that temperatures overall are higher. But the reports I get on soil moisture is that it's reasonably okay, but as I say, some are thinking that it may be a dry summer again.
He adds New Zealanders have to be resilient and help farmers make decisions earlier rather than later. Mo te hōtaka o te ahipo nei, ko Tom Kitchen aho.
It's 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. In England, a new alert system of coronavirus restrictions will be announced soon as local mayors and council leaders continue last-minute negotiations with the UK government. They're trying to thrash out as much financial support as possible. Overnight, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson will lead a meeting before revealing the outcome early tomorrow morning. The BBC's Dan Johnson reports from Liverpool where tough new measures are likely.
Case numbers have been rising here and across other big cities in the north and into the Midlands too. So there's acceptance that further measures are needed and that will be likely to result in further economic pain. But this is not just about health versus wealth. This is about culture, enjoyment, about the amount of life we can actually continue living. And on the table are pubs, clubs, the gyms, bookmakers and casinos here. And the region's mayor told me tonight that he will not agree to those closures until there is the right support in place to look after the workers who will be affected and until he has a clear way out of these local lockdowns so that cities like this are not stuck in another lockdown for month after month. On the loudest, liveliest streets, people worry about what's to come. And they want to be listened to be understood.
All the things that are getting cancelled, the things that they enjoyed this time of year, Halloween, bonfire night, Christmas, so these are the things that we're going to have to compromise with. If he'd have done it earlier, I think we could have got this far.
The only way you're going to do it is total lockdown.
Once you've got total lockdown, you've got it under control.
We were doing really well before all of this happened.
But listen to Connor, running a pub already quietened by local restrictions.
We're not even breaking even at the minute, never mind being able to pull back all the rent that we still owe or pay back the wages that we topped up. And further restrictions could be a final nail in a lot of people's coffins, unfortunately.
And I would say our sales are down 50%.
And Jonathan's wondering whether restaurants will be hit by new tiers of rules.
You know, Liverpool has known tough years, and I've been here when it's been tough, but, you know, of the last sort of 10 or 15 years, it's been a brilliant place to be, and it worries me that rug could be pulled.
Consider too the challenge of enforcing even tougher restrictions. There's frustration about how these rules are being introduced, and there's concern about how and when they're lifted.
But after the curfew, came in, it was just game over.
But think about Joe, still paying for the taxi that no longer covers his bills.
You don't know where you're going to be in 4 weeks' time. Am I going to be driving a taxi or going to be working in a factory or living on the dole with no money?
Closing time is coming for more businesses. And this city, famous for the musical sounds it sent around the world, now waits with others to find out how much of life is about to be silenced.
Dan Johnson reporting from Liverpool. An investigation in Australia has found the dating app Tinder is failing to act when women report being sexually assaulted. Tinder has reinvented the way we meet people, but ABC Australia's Four Corners program and the radio station Triple J has found the app's internal features allow perpetrators to find potential victims and delete identifying and incriminating evidence. Avani Dias filed this report.
Inhale developing feelings for someone. Exhale Chad's number from your phone.
With its slick ads, Tinder's become one of the top earning apps in the world, making billions of dollars.
When I first got on Tinder, I guess I was trying to find love or to try and find someone to be in a relationship with.
But a joint investigation has found the app's business model is enabling sexual predators to operate freely.
I first matched with him in 2017. I was in my last year of uni.
Brooks, a 25-year-old woman from regional Victoria. On the third date with her Tinder match, the man drove her to secluded bushland and persuaded her to get into the back seat of the car.
Then when he pulled my shorts off, I was like, no, I'm really not in the mood. I don't want this. And he just didn't say anything. And he then pulled his pants off and just went for it and just raped me.
The next morning, Brooke decided to report the attack to Tinder, but the man had blocked her using the app's unmatch function, which deleted their entire chat history.
I guess that was probably the main reason that I didn't go to the police, was because I didn't have his number, I didn't know his last name, I didn't have any photos or proof that we'd even spoken to each other before.
In March, more than 400 people responded to a Triple J hack call-out on dating apps and sexual assault. And Brooke's experience came up again and again. Alleged rapists using Tinder's unmatching feature to disappear from their victims' phones. New South Wales Police Assistant Commissioner Stuart Smith says it significantly hampers their ability to pursue sexual assault allegations.
Obviously, as investigators, we're always looking for corroboration of the victim's version or evidence of the thing occurring. It wouldn't be our choice in terms of these things having blocking systems.
A statement from Tinder's parent company Match Group says it acts on every report received and vigilantly removes and blocks anyone reported for this behaviour, adding that it works with law enforcement to ensure that justice is served. Tinder brought in almost $2 billion in revenue last year, and Erin Turner from consumer advocacy group Choice says such a lucrative company needs to do better.
You can see where they're investing. They're putting their money and their time into getting people to pay more. They're not necessarily investing in consumer protections or safety features.
And that report by the ABC's Avani Dias. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but what about $100,000 fine? That's what selfie hunters posing with little blue penguins in Napier could face if caught. Department of Conservation Ranger Chris Wooten says it's disturbing that people are pestering and potentially hurting the birds during nesting season.
People have been picking up penguins and taking selfies, posting them on social media. So it's illegal behaviour under the Wildlife Act. Penguins, or korora, little blue penguins, are totally protected wildlife. So first of all, it's an offence, but secondly, it's not good for the wildlife involved. We're in the middle of breeding season at the moment. Penguins are coming ashore to nest, raise their young. So any disturbance of them at all is not good for them and their chances of successful breeding.
It's just plain daft, isn't it?
It is idiotic behaviour. You've got to wonder what planet these people are on, if they're living in a Disney cartoon perhaps, to think this is appropriate behaviour, because it's not.
What do you think is going through their heads? Why are they doing it, do you reckon?
Well, I think it's just a degree of selfishness and perhaps symptomatic of the social media world that everyone's pretty much a part of these days, but it's definitely just simply idiotic behaviour.
So you think they probably just want a cute pic with a little blue penguin so they can chuck it up on their social media?
I would say that's the case, Lisa. That's what they're doing, but they're doing it in ignorance of the fact that they're breaking the law. It's definitely an offence under the Wildlife Act, and the Paparatawhai DOC will follow up in all cases, so we're encouraging people to report these people in if they see that sort of behaviour going on, or even note it online, then let DOC know and we'll follow up.
OK, so it's against the law, but let's explain to people why it is a problem specifically. What are you doing when you pick up one of these little blue penguins? And yeah, there's no doubt they're cute, but what are the risks?
Well, the first risk you're going to pose to yourself is you're going to get a nasty nip and potentially lose an eye or part of your finger, because they've got pretty strong beaks, the adults. If you're picking up chicks out of nests, then they may be infected with parasites, so you'll be getting perhaps a dose of fleas if you insist on doing that.
And in terms of the birds themselves, what damage could you do to them?
Well, it's like for all wildlife, if you're disturbing them, especially during the breeding season, you're wrecking their chance of reproducing, bringing up their young safely on the nest. So it's not just korora or penguins that people need to be aware of in our coastal situations, and certainly the time of the year when people are going down to the coast more. Got wildlife such as kekeno or New Zealand fur seal ashore in places where we've got nesting shorebirds. So it's all wildlife that people need to be aware they're sharing that coastal space with.
Can you damage their kind of waterproofing if you're handling them?
Well, potentially you could. You could do physical harm to the birds just by rough handling of them. Our message to people is just leave wildlife well alone, keep some space. If you want to take a photo, take it from some distance away. No problem with that.
So, people who have been foolish enough to take a couple of snaps of themselves with a little blue penguin and chuck it up on their social media, are you going to look at that social media and track them down and have a word?
Yes, we will. We're always taking reports seriously. This particular report we've received through, and we're going to follow it up as best we can, try and identify the people involved. And people doing this sort of activity or this behaviour, they can expect DOC to be following up. Potentially they could face a fine under the Wildlife Act, or even to the extent of imprisonment. The offences under the Wildlife Act provide for that.
So what's your basic message to them? What, penguins are not a plaything?
Yeah, penguins are not a plaything. Penguins are wildlife. They're our taonga, our treasured species on the coast. Enjoy them, but keep your distance.
Chris, just out of curiosity, what kind of fine could you get for this?
The Wildlife Act provides for fines up to $100,000.
So it could be a pretty expensive selfie.
Yep, that's right.
And that's Department of Conservation Ranger Chris Wooten there. Some feedback from you before the 6 o'clock news on international students. So the government is going to allow 250 postgrad students in under special border exemptions. They'll still have to isolate. Jane from Dunedin says, great to hear that some postgrad students will be able to come to New Zealand. They are the powerhouse of university research. Hopefully early career academic staff appointed to start in lecturing jobs will also be allowed into the country. Someone else says we need research to continue in this new world, and international students are a means and an ends to also participate in our university's work and revenue for research. I'm an ex-Dunedin kid and graduate. The city needs the diversity and population influx, as I'm sure all uni towns do, including Auckland's CBD. And on the CBD, this person says, good idea going back to work in the city, but how do we get there? Rail lines aren't working at full capacity at the moment.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. The 250 international students being allowed to return to New Zealand will be selected based on how valuable they are. Only students at master's or PhD level holding a 2020 visa will be able to apply for selection to the border exemptions announced by the government today. The selection process will consider those postgraduate students who can't study online. The chair of the government agency Education New Zealand, Steve Mahari, has told Checkpoint they will also consider the value they provide.
These kinds of students, of course, also are involved in research which is useful to New Zealand. So having them back into the country completing their course of study will be useful to us. So, for example, if they're involved in agricultural studies, of course, that's very useful to New Zealand, particularly at this time.
All those chosen will have to pay the $3,000 fee to stay in managed isolation for 2 weeks upon arrival. New Zealanders still won't know the referendum results any earlier despite record numbers of advance voting. More than 1.15 million votes have been cast early, with more than 450,000 of those cast at the weekend. But Professor of Law at Otago University, Andrew Geddes, says that won't fast-track the referendum result announcement.
The referendum votes aren't going to be counted until all the parliamentary votes have been counted. And so the Electoral Commission's made it clear we won't find out the referendum vote until early November.
The polls close at 7 p.m. on election day. Jacinda Ardern says she's frustrated by the National Party's inaccurate warnings about a wealth tax. The Labour leader made the comments while in the Waikato today in the final week of the election campaign. National Party leader Judith Collins has attacked Labour over the prospect of it implementing a wealth tax as part of a coalition agreement with the Green Party, despite Ms Ardern ruling it out.
My only frustration is that the National Party continues to use misinformation in their campaign. My view is that they should be courageous enough to debate real issues and fact, not fiction.
The Labour leader, Jacinda Ardern. Media outlets are seeking to urgently appeal the name suppression granted to the pair charged over the New Zealand First Foundation donations. The Serious Fraud Office has charged 2 people with obtaining by deception after its investigation into the foundation. Annika Smith reports.
Last week, RNZ, Stuff, NZME and TVNZ took the defendants to court to challenge an interim name suppression order. The media outlets argued there was compelling public interest in knowing the identities of the accused so close to an election. The District Court saw otherwise and ruled in favour of the defendants, extending the suppression order until the first court hearing in 2 weeks' time. Today, media lawyer Robert Stewart filed an urgent notice of appeal to the High Court, asking for an urgent hearing tomorrow. Ko Annika Smith aho.
Businesses are welcoming the easing of water restrictions in Auckland. From today, firms can use outdoor hoses with a handheld trigger nozzle, and commercial car washes can also operate. There is still a ban on outdoor hoses for residents. Brian Edwards, who runs a blasting washing business in Red Beach, rallied against restrictions when they were first imposed and says it's a privilege to be able to use the city supply again.
Albeit they've turned the taps back on the industry, they can turn them off really quickly. You know, water is like gold. It's precious and it's priceless. You know, it comes at a cost.
Businessman Brian Edwards. Otago University is no longer facing legal action over its medical admissions process. The medical school was facing a legal challenge after proposing a cap on admissions for Māori and Pasifika students through preferential entry. The university says it has talked to the person and he has agreed to not take the matter to court at this stage. It says he is satisfied that the university will take the appropriate steps to ensure there is greater transparency over admissions. No compensation has been paid as part of the agreement. President Trump has suggested he is immune from the coronavirus as he resumes campaigning with just 3 weeks to go until the US election. Chagruti Dave reports from Washington.
President Trump tweeted on Sunday that White House doctors gave him a total and complete sign-off, adding that it means I can't get it, brackets immune, and can't give it. Twitter flagged the tweet with a warning label saying it violated rules when it comes to spreading misleading and potentially harmful information related to COVID-19. Earlier, the president gave a Fox News interview where he also claimed he was immune. On Saturday, the White House doctor released a memo saying the president is no longer considered a transmission risk and could resume public events. However, he did not say if Mr. Trump had tested negative for the coronavirus.
Chagruti Dave in Washington. It's 5 minutes past 6. The England Roses are in New Zealand without their coach Jess Thirlby, who tested positive for COVID-19 before the team left. However, Roses star Serena Guthrie says Thirlby is still only a phone call away as the world number 3 netball side prepare for their test series against the Silver Ferns in Hamilton.
It was a big shock to the group. Since then, we've had no choice but to crack on. We understand that there's still a test series to be played, and that's kind of how Jess would want us to conduct ourselves anyway. So, from that point forward, she's not with us, but she's very much with us kind of virtually and on the other end of the phone at the moment.
The Roses are in quarantine and expect to be able to train from tomorrow. The All Blacks' first five, Richie Mo'unga, was trying to line himself up for a drop goal to end the Bledisloe Cup deadlock against the Wallabies, but says things never fell his way. The match ended in a 16-all draw, with the All Blacks pressing for a try in the final minutes. Mo'unga, who says he can't remember when he last attempted a drop goal to win a match, says it was on his mind.
There's a couple of times I dropped in the pocket, but momentum had us, and so drop kick wasn't in the question, and had Geordie got the pass or we'd got the pass away, we wouldn't really be talking about drop kicks, but I felt like we were going forward and could have scored.
First five, Richie Mo'unga. The Los Angeles Lakers have won a record equalling 17th NBA basketball championship with a 106-93 victory over the Miami Heat in Game 6 of the Best of 7 series. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we've got a window on the world of dyslexia. Nick Bollinger samples the latest from Sufjan Stevens. Ricky Swinnell looks back on the weekend's sport, which included 9 minutes of the best rugby this side of the COVID pandemic. It even had an audience. And I speak to the brains behind City at the Centre, a new history of Palmerston North, on Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Periods of rain clearing from the west tomorrow afternoon and evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mostly fine. Scattered rain in Hawke's Bay, spreading to Gisborne tomorrow. Taranaki to Wellington, including Wairarapa. Rain heavy about the high ground, easing tonight. Isolated showers tomorrow, gradually clearing. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago except Clutha. Scattered showers, some possibly heavy and thundery with hail today, especially for inland Canterbury. Showers becoming isolated tomorrow morning and areas of low cloud clearing. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, scattered showers turning to rain in Fiordland tomorrow night. Southland and Clutha becoming fine tonight apart from isolated showers inland. Fine tomorrow apart from areas of morning fog and rain at night. And Chatham Islands a few showers turning to rain tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A TV ad that implied customers could access renewable power if they switched to Meridian Energy has been ordered off air after the Advertising Standards Authority ruled it made unsubstantiated environmental claims. Rival power company Electric Kiwi complained about the ad with the tagline "For power that doesn't cost the earth." It featured Nige, the eco-warrior who rejects plastic bags and straws. Now, the power company argued that ads suggested switching to Meridian would give customers access to greener power, when in fact all of New Zealand's power is sourced from a pool of generators, meaning they can't guarantee the power you get is solar or hydro generated, for example, and therefore no retailer is greener than others. Well, joining me now to discuss the decision is Kath Dewar, who is the Managing Director of Good Sense, an ethical marketing company. Good evening, Kath.
Hello, Lisa.
Is this greenwashing?
Yeah, I think the ASA have made a really good call, and good on them for holding Meridian to account on this. The claim in the ad just isn't substantiated.
Should they have known better? They're using the tagline, switch to Meridian for power that doesn't cost the earth.
Well, I think part of the problem with it is that advertising is a bit of a blunt tool. And we know now that most New Zealanders want to buy from companies who are doing better by nature and by people. But they actually deserve respectful communications that communicates properly what companies are doing. Fluffy feel-good ads are a really difficult tool to do that well.
So is it common then? Is this a common mistake? Are a lot of companies in their advertising or their branding using maybe half-truths or things that they absolutely cannot substantiate?
It's not that common in New Zealand. We actually have really good regulations in place through the Commerce Commission and a voluntary code through the Advertising Standards Authority, who this was made to. But it has happened in phases and waves in the past, and it tends to follow upsurges in public interest in buying more socially and environmentally considered services or products. And so we're clearly seeing that at the moment. Like, New Zealanders have really had enough of businesses creating a climate crisis and polluting our seas and our land. And so they want to make the right choice, but they need information to do that. So good marketing and communication that tells stories well is really important, but it's kind of really hard to do that properly in 15 to 30 seconds. So there's companies that depend on advertising to kind of grab your attention and amuse you, are kind of not really doing right by what the public need in terms of information.
So how discerning then are consumers when they watch those ads?
Well, it shouldn't be down to buyer beware, and in fact it's not. Like, the Commerce Commission, the Advertising Standards, they regulate this, and they're very clear that advertisers can't try and pass themselves off as greener than they are, and they must substantiate any claims they make. But the Commerce Commission and the Advertising Standards Authority can only act if we make a complaint. So it is really important that other companies do complain, but also that the public who care about this stuff, if they go, hang on a minute, I know that Meridian are currently under investigation, having had a preliminary warning for actually spilling water out of a dam which could have been used for hydro. They've kind of got some dodgy stuff going on here. I actually am going to look into this a bit further. So it is important that we are skilled, but really it's down to companies to do the right thing and to understand the law when they're making an ad. There's certain things you can and can't do when you're advertising, and, Meridian needed to be more on their game with this. It's cost them money.
Do you know whether customers react better to companies that basically share their progress rather than talking about an absolute? So, for example, you might be a takeaway coffee company and you say, hey, we're not perfect, but we're recycling half our cups and we hope to get the other half done by XYZ date, rather than presenting yourself as being absolutely on top of it, which goes down better.
Yeah, look, totally. Like, people want an authentic, transparent approach. That's really clear, and it's been really clear for years now, actually, in this space. People aren't daft. They want to know actually what's happening, and a authentic approach that communicates not just the glass is half full, but actually we've got some empty glass to sort out too, goes down much, much better. And it actually builds a relationship. Really, this is about shared values. Do you as a company care about the same things that I care about as a member of the public trying to make a decision? I don't want you to look good. I want you to be good and tell me why you are and where your progress is going to be and track towards that.
So, Kath, are there other companies that you think are on the wrong side of that line?
Well, I was pretty astounded to see what the warehouse were claiming on a website where they were advertising last week. So I'm having a bit of a clear look at what they've got going on, to be honest, because I think where we have this very clear public interest in doing the right thing, it does create a sense of vulnerability where some brands might just try to go for a quick win. And actually, marketers and advertisers just need to understand that there are rules around environmental claims the same way there are rules around advertising to children or advertising alcohol. You know, you can't just do and say anything.
So, Kath, were there claims on the warehouse site which related to their environmental chops that you were a little uncomfortable with?
Yeah, absolutely. They say that they're going to be New Zealand's most sustainable company, and I'm really interested in where the substantiation for that is. So I'm going to be taking a look at that one.
So what do you say to consumers and customers then? What's the best advice?
So do know the rules, like go and have a look and be aware and ask for substantiation, like get the compensation claim, but also make a complaint. You can go online to the ASA website and you can make a complaint. They'll want to see a copy of the ad and they'll want to know where you're concerned about it.
Appreciate your time.
The Commerce Commission actually can fine companies as well, and that has happened in the past. So, yeah. And really, just companies need to do better, treat the public with respect. This stuff is important to get right, and we can all do better.
Thanks for your advice, Kath. That is Kath Dewar, who's the Managing Director of Good Sense. And some of you have been getting in touch about this one. Steve says, Kia ora, Lisa, I think most power customers would realise all electrons in the power lines are mixed up. That seems obvious to me, so I don't think Meridian's TV ads are misleading to most consumers. Why shouldn't Meridian get some credit for generating sustainable energy? I think that's the point that Kath was making. Maybe they need to separate out the two things and be clearer on it. Someone else, though, says, I'm disappointed in Meridian. I chose Meridian over other power companies because my impression was that they were greener than the rest. Even though they are more expensive, I felt I was contributing to greener energy. Turns out they're not. I'm really happy that they've been called out on this. Nice work, says Sarah from Christchurch. And another person says, I can see why they might seem misleading, but not if you understand the power supply. I think they should be able to get some recognition for their mode of power generation. Maybe they should just reword slightly, that listener says. And I suppose that is the point that Kath Dewar, who is a Managing Director of Good Sense, which is an ethical marketing company, says, tell the whole truth, separate out what you're doing good from what you've not got, as well as it should be. It is 16 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Auckland water blasting businesses are breathing a sigh of relief now that the region's water restrictions have been eased for commercial users. But the region's water woes are far from over. The area's dams are still way lower than normal for this time of the year, and the council's not ruling out restrictions being reimposed or limits becoming the norm for every summer. Jean Bell reports.
Auckland businesses are now allowed to use outdoor hoses with a handheld trigger nozzle, and commercial car washes can also operate again. However, there are no changes to the ban on outdoor hoses for residential users who still need to use buckets for things like watering the garden or washing the car. Brian Edwards, who runs a blasting washing business in Red Beach, rallied against the water restrictions when they were first imposed, saying the tap had been turned off on businesses. He says it is a privilege to be able to use city water again, and he's very aware the drought is far from over and restrictions remain on households.
Albeit they've turned the taps back on the industry, they can turn them off really quickly. You know, water is like gold. It's precious and it's priceless. You know, it comes at a cost.
Brian Edwards helped establish the Exterior Cleaning Industry Association. The association is working with Watercare to set best practice guidelines to help minimise water use by businesses. He says the industry association lobbied for access to the taps, saying they use only 0.07% of the water used every day in the city.
That is around 270,000 litres based on the 400 million litres that are used in the winter period in summer. But that's not 7 days a week. Okay, so it even drops lower to roughly 0.005. Now, it's not a lot.
Watercare Acting Chief Executive Marlon Bridge says easing restrictions is the right thing to do for the sake of businesses being hit in the pocket by COVID.
our business customers, and particularly our larger business customers, have been significant savers in relation to our requests to manage water supply. So I think it is the right thing to do.
He says water restrictions will be necessary for the summer while new water sources are being secured and anticipated rainfall makes up for last summer's drought. But once these are on board, he doesn't think water restrictions in future summers will be necessary.
Ultimately, with the more supply that's coming on, I wouldn't envisage it being a long-term requirement.
He says it is too early to tell whether residential restrictions will be eased. That depends on whether Auckland continues to save water and rainfall levels. Many cities around the country, such as Christchurch, Whangarei and Tauranga, have regular summertime water restrictions. Auckland Mayor Phil Goff says Hamilton City Council also has regular restrictions and as part of its agreement to give Auckland up to 25 million litres more water per day, expects Auckland to follow suit.
Auckland may need to look at doing that for the future if it looks like the summer is drier than average.
The weather forecast and reservoir levels would determine the severity of restrictions.
Preferably reasonably light restrictions, but that will depend on the nature of the summer and the nature of the water storage levels in our dams.
Mayor Phil Goff says this week's easing of restrictions on businesses will be monitored closely, and if drought continues, restrictions may need to be reimposed. Auckland Council will revisit restrictions on households in December, taking dam levels and the summer rain forecast into consideration. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jeanbao tēnei.
The stats say the Wallabies beat the All Blacks in pretty much every facet of the first Bledisloe Cup test, except where it counts, on the scoreboard. A 20-year winless run against the All Blacks remains for the Australians after yesterday's 16-all draw, but the result has sparked new interest in the 4-test Bledisloe Cup series. Sports reporter Felicity Reid has more.
A moment of drama in Test rugby. What a huge kick that is! Oh, the post! Oh my goodness! All Blacks can't touch it. They dive on it. They were nearly offside there. Now can the Wallabies turn it over?
The Wallabies went agonisingly close to winning the test when a 58-metre penalty kick from Reece Hodge hit the upright and sparked a further 9 minutes of action-packed extra time, eventually all to no avail. Hodge says he's been replaying the kick in his mind, pondering what he might have done differently.
Bit of a broken sleep last night. I've probably replayed it hundreds of times by now, but obviously pretty swelly wind in Wellington. Throughout the warm-up, they were kind of going everywhere, left, right, and kind of you always get told to just aim straight down the middle, kind of aimed it just inside the left post, and yeah, turns out just outside the left post would have been a bit better. Yeah, I struck it as well as I could have and was kind of just praying when it was in the air.
Australia outperformed the All Blacks in metres gained, carries and passes. They also conceded fewer turnovers and were forced into fewer tackles. But despite the stats being against them, All Blacks coach Ian Foster refuses to concede that they were second best, rather suggesting they need to simply even up the odds for the second test in Auckland this weekend.
We've clearly got to figure out how to we've got to make sure we get a bit of ball and start imposing ourselves on them. So it was a little bit of one-way traffic in terms of possession, and not something we'd like to see repeated too often.
As the match went from end to end in the last 10 minutes, there was plenty of discussion around why the All Blacks didn't try to seal the test with a drop goal. First five, Richie Mo'unga, says it was certainly on his mind.
There's a couple of times I dropped in the pocket, but momentum had us, and so drop kick wasn't in the question. And had Geordie got the pass or we'd got the pass away, we wouldn't really be talking about drop kicks, but I felt like we were going forward and could have scored.
For Wallabies coach, Wellington born and raised Dave Rennie, not managing to end a 20-year winless streak was disappointing, but pulling off a draw in his debut as Australia coach made it a day to remember.
Pretty special for me personally, my 3 sons and their partners and 2 granddaughters and a lot of really good friends in the stand, all wearing yellow, which impressed me.
History is well and truly against the Wallabies, turning things around in Auckland this coming Sunday. The All Blacks were unbeaten in 43 matches at Eden Park, dating back to 1994, a fact Reece Hodge says the Wallabies are well aware of.
We know that they're going to come out firing next week. They'll be just as disappointed as us. And, Auckland has traditionally been such a stronghold for them and a bit of a fortress. So it's exciting times for us. We've got a chance next week to get our first win there in however many years it is and really set us up well for a couple of home tests to finish off the Bledisloe series.
So rather than celebrating the draw, the Wallabies are using it as motivation to go one step better this weekend. Any thoughts the All Blacks simply needed to turn up to keep hold of the Bledisloe Cup have been well and truly quashed, making the series all the better for it. For Checkpoint, Felicity Reid.
The England netball team is in the country going through isolation before they can start preparing for their matches against the Silver Ferns. The two sides will meet at the end of the month for the first international netball since COVID-19 disrupted the sport. But England's here without their coach because she tested positive for COVID-19 before the team left England. Mid-quarter, Serena Guthrie told sports reporter Bridget Tunnicliffe it was a shock, but they've turned their focus to the test series.
Since then, we've had no choice but to crack on. We understand that there's still a test series to be played, and that's kind of how Jess would want us to conduct ourselves anyway. So, from that point forward, she's not with us, but she's very much with us kind of virtually and on the other end of the phone at the moment. So, we're filling in the gaps where we can and, just kind of cracking on the best we can.
And have you actually started training yet?
No, we haven't. No. So hopefully we can start training tomorrow, which will be really exciting. So the girls are very much looking forward to that. I am particularly as well. Self-isolation, it's all right for a few days, but, we're quite looking forward to kind of reconnecting as a group. And hopefully, if test results come back negative, then, we can crack on as two groups tomorrow, two separate groups for a little bit longer, and then hopefully be together as one large group in the near future.
How cool is it knowing that this test series with the Silver Ferns will be the first international netball played since COVID really hit the fan?
Yeah, look, it's really exciting. I think, credit to Netball New Zealand and also England Netball as well. And yeah, you're right. It is cool to be able to step out, in the red dress. And I'm sure the Silver Ferns will be feeling excited about stepping out in the black dress as well, and representing international netball. It's key that we keep our sport out there in the international media, keep that momentum going. And I think, from our part, our fans are so excited to see some international netball. It's been tough for female sport in particular back home for us. So for us to be a female sport stepping out and trying to grab some momentum back after what has been quite a tough year is really, really exciting.
You started your overseas netball career at the Northern Mystics. What are some of your memories from that time?
I love being at the Mystics. It's the team that gave me, I suppose, my start in my professional netball career. So I hold that team very close to my heart and love the 2 seasons that I had out with them. And, with Debbie and Knowles, who, now obviously heading up the Silver Ferns, and I'll always remember some good memories with Debbie. She's a good crack, isn't she? And she's a great energy giver. And you can see that in terms of with her vibe and her energy that she has currently in the Silver Ferns. And I suppose having a bit of experience with Knowlesy, she's a great leader. She's great at creating good environments. And you can clearly see that they've got that team ticking. So good on them. And yeah, those 2 characters particularly were really key in terms of me having a great experience at the Mystics.
The Silver Ferns meet England for a 3-test series in Hamilton starting October 28th. Of all the sectors affected by the coronavirus, few have been harder hit than international travel. Thailand faces a particular dilemma. The country's tourism industry accounted for roughly 1/5 of its economy before the pandemic. The BBC's Jonathan Head visited Koh Phangan Island, which hosts the famous monthly full moon party. He looked at how the popular tourist island has been affected.
This was one of the world's most famous beaches, with an equally famous party. Hat Rin on Thailand's Koh Phangan used to be an essential stop on every backpacker's itinerary. But something so wild, so crowded, so dependent on mass travel was never going to survive COVID-19.
Like a
tsunami, it crashed and everything fell with it, says Naramit Somwong, who rents out motorbikes. Look around you. There's no income here anymore.
Right now, it's full moon again, and until COVID-19 kept all the tourists away, by this time the beach would have been filling up, the DJs cranking up their music, and hundreds of businesses doing well. There were plenty of jobs and profits, nearly all of them now gone. But the people who live on this lovely island are now wondering, whenever international travel starts up again, whether they might not do it differently next time.
There's a lot less pollution now, though these rubbish volunteers still find plenty left on the beach, even 6 months after the parties stopped. It's a chance for Koh Phangan's natural environment to recover.
We live here, we have our family here.
And businesses, foreign and locally owned, are now discussing a greener future for the island economy.
But there's also many other things that people can see on the island, and we want to promote
one that's focused on longer stays, on a greater sense of community.
We'll do it in a kind of ecologically conscious way as well.
Some of the island's residents have now started a community garden to showcase this new, less material spirit. The vegetables grown here are to help those who've lost their jobs to the COVID crisis.
The BBC's Jonathan Head in Thailand. And some feedback before we go on the deserted Auckland CBD. Warwick says, my office in Central City used to be 4 big floors filled. Today I went in, as I do now, about 2 days a week, and we were less than half one floor of people in total. The new normal, sadly, says Warwick. Don't forget, you can check out all our stories online. First Up, we'll be back with you first thing tomorrow, and we'll be with you from 5 p.m. tomorrow evening. And just 5 sleeps to go to Election Day.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The move to relax border restrictions for some international students is seen as vital to ensure this country stays on the map for prospective students. A Māori Party candidate has been arrested for trespassing while trying to stop work for a new roading development in Hamilton. A record-breaking 1.15 million people have cast early votes for this weekend's election. And conservationists believe a large whale that died under an Auckland wharf today was likely disoriented by shallow waters. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
I wasn't necessarily enthusiastic about watching 5 guys in a room yelling at each other.
Live with local, national and international stories and some music with your news.
I actually bought something today. Linda Ronstadt.
Ronstadt?
I've actually never heard of her before. I think she